The United States has two interceptor launch sites aimed at intercepting any nuclear warhead launches. The first, Fort Greely in Alaska, is attacked by unknown assailants presumably affiliated with a terrorist faction, while 16 nuclear warheads are simultaneously seized from Russian territory. The second site is a remote platform in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. U.S. Army Captain J.J. Collins is recently reassigned to the latter of the two interceptor missile launch sites, following a high-profile case where she reported sexual misconduct by her superior. She experienced hazing, bullying, and threats, and a new deployment as retaliation under LT Colonel Marshall, and working alongside CPL Beaver Baker and CPL Rahul Shah in the station's command center. Collins is part of the last line of defense after the hostile takeover of Fort Greely. The station is infiltrated by a small group of operatives led by ex-military intelligence soldier Kessel, who promptly kill Marshall and the other occupants of the base, leaving only Collins, Shah, and an unconscious Deaver who was grazed by a stray bullet in the command center. The infiltrators attempt to enter the command center, by which they can disarm the interceptor system and leave the U.S. open to nuclear attack from the 16 stolen warheads. However, they are rebuffed and attempt to forcibly enter instead. With blowtorches, an operative launches a surprise attack after entering via a floor hatch, but is defeated and killed by Collins and Shah. Beaver regains consciousness and reveals himself to be an inside man for the infiltrators and motivated by a big payday and xenophobia, holding both Collins and Shah at gunpoint while allowing Kessel and the remaining operatives to enter and assume control. Kessel hijacks a live feed and streams his manifesto about the failures in the history of the United States online, naming the 16 American cities to be destroyed and instructing the terrorist faction to launch the nukes immediately. Collins breaks free of her restraints and locks Kessel, Beaver, and a henchman back out of the command center while defeating and killing Kira, the lone enemy operative still in the room, and another henchman. Kessel attempts to force Collins to surrender, torturing her father, but she refuses and her father is apparently killed when the transmission is cut. Kessel then plans to scuttle the station if he cannot take control of it as the station begins to sink. Shah volunteers to drop through the floor hatch to the ocean below and manually re-engage the Kessel attempts to force Collins to surrender, torturing her father, but she refuses and her father is apparently killed when the transmission is cut. Kessel then plans to scuttle the station if he cannot take control of it as the station begins to sink. Shah volunteers to drop through the floor hatch to the ocean below and manually re-engage the station's hatches, such that the interceptors are still able to launch and destroy the warheads when they eventually pass through the airspace overhead. Shah succeeds, but he is killed by Beaver. Collins hides in the command center and letting Kessel, Beaver, and the remaining henchmen take over and disable the seemingly empty center. Her ruse works, with Beaver going too. Checked up on the station's roof to find and eliminate her, Collins is able to stealthily dispatch the remaining henchmen while Kessel flees the room, grabbing a laptop. Collins ascends to the roof and plugs the device in, helping to manually launch the interceptor missiles. Using this method, she is found by Beaver and they engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Collins emerging victorious after using razor wire to decapitate Beaver. Kessel, who had called in a Russian submarine to pick up the team of operatives earlier, finds Collins just as she successfully launches the interceptor missiles with a fraction of a second left before the nukes would have crossed the point of interception. His plan failed. He engages in combat with Collins, who manages to defeat and subdue him just as the Russian submarine ascends from the sea. A pair of Russians emerge from the submarine tower, But rather than shooting Collins, they fire at Kessel instead, and the Russian captain salutes Collins before departing. Collins later recovers from her ordeal in the hospital, and she is personally given a promotion by the US president for her efforts. She also receives a visit of her father, who had been rescued by friends who had witnessed his plight on the live broadcast, and he comforts her over her grief for Shah's death.